My name is Adelman. I'm here to talk about new business models and wearables. Before I get started, I'll give you a little background on myself. As mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of MightyCast, and we're bringing a modular wearable to the market this summer called the Neckband, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But what I really wanted to do today was talk about my previous lifetime, which was before wearable tech, even before I started my first startup, and that was when I was in the financial industry. And for about 10 years, I worked for various investment banks and hedge funds, and I was always tasked with trying to identify emerging companies in new technology and new media, and making investment decisions on them. And when I started, it was at a strange time. It was right around the end of the bubble when everyone was excited about all of these new technologies, and then there was the crash, and then everyone just got very, very focused on the business models and cash flow and how do you make money with new emerging technology. So when I was evaluating different companies and I was looking at some of the more traditional companies, the consumer goods companies, we noticed that obviously, as everyone knows, they have very, very low margins, and then they tend to get commoditized very, very quickly. And they would have margins as low as 10% or even lower. And it wasn't even that surprising sometimes to see relatively successful companies with very, very strong revenue to have sales that were even higher than their total valuation. Then, you know, as mobility started to come in, we started seeing a lot more mobile applications, and those had a lot higher margins in the 30 to 35% area. And then the best, most powerful margins were in those virtual goods, and those had, depending on how you did your accounting, those could have margins as high as 90 or even 95%. But the problem with those businesses were that very, very few of them were successful, and it was very hard to differentiate and get a very large audience. And in the end, it ended up that only about 7 or 8% of those companies would even make back their initial investment. So when we were looking at business models, we went back to kind of the old boring businesses. So for example, the Gillette business model, who literally invented the razor blade business model. We looked at that as a great example. And even as a consumer, I know, and it's painful for me when I walk into Target and I need to buy some new razor blades, and I'll buy like a pack of them, and they're like $100. And you know, they're secured, and they won't let you take them. You have to get someone to take them down. That's how valuable those razor blades are. So obviously, it was in Gillette's interest to give away as many of those razors as they could, because all of their margin comes from those razor blades. And we see this with a lot of other companies too, right? When we start getting more into technology. So the cell phone companies really know the lifetime value of their customer really, really well. So they know it so well that they know they could give away their cell phones for free, and they can make back that lost revenue in that high margin subscription revenue relatively quickly. And then the same thing with the printer industry. So I remember in the 90s and even in the 2000s, it was difficult to go to a Best Buy and buy a computer without them forcing a free printer on you. And the reason was obvious. They wanted to recover that investment with the toner that they would sell you. And they would usually make that up after about 4 or 5 sales of toner. So they really, again, understood the lifetime value of their customer, and that's how they set up their business models. And their business models influence the user experience as well. So I would argue that the user experience is really dictated a lot by the business models themselves as well. So we saw a lot of different business models when I was analyzing companies, from freemium to mobile, and we were always looking for business models that would cross over into technology. So then we started looking at, well, can we take this razor blade business model and apply it to companies that are trying to bridge that physical and digital divide? And one very, very good example of that is what Activision has done with Skylanders. So I don't know how many people know about Skylanders? So some people have 6-year-old boys at home. So Skylanders is it's a console game, a first-person shooter game. But you go to the store and you buy these little characters, and they're anywhere between $10 and $15. And you go to the store, you buy this character, and you bring it home, and you put it on your portal. And then as soon as you put it on the portal, that character springs to life, and then you can go run around and start shooting with them. And they were so successful with this because the kids were so interested in the collectability of these Skylanders figures that they ended up doing over $3 billion in retail sales just over the last few years, and then they spawned other industries as well. So Amiibo is in there with Nintendo, Disney Infinity, who just recently exited, but they wanted to get into it as well. So we're starting to see this happen with this digital to physical divide. It's just a little anecdote. My son, who is now 8, he was very much into Skylanders when he was 6. We would always buy him these Skylanders if he cleans his room, clears the dishes, that kind of thing, good bribery kind of material. And then we would always notice he would go to the store and he would spend a lot of time picking out his Skylander, and we would bring it home, and he would just put it on the table and line them up with all the other Skylander figures. And then I remember saying, well, don't you want to play with it? Don't you want to put it on that console and see what happens to it? And the first thing he was just very interested in was collecting it and looking and standing back and looking at his collection. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And in wearables, not wearable tech, but in wearables, we see that as well with Pandora, for example. So it's very, very much the same psychology, the same kind of, if you want to call it, play pattern, that notion of collectability. And I'm sure Pandora, again, really understands that lifetime value of their customer, and they know exactly what price point, entry price point, they need to make that bracelet so that they can start selling that high margin recurring revenue of the charms themselves. So when we were starting the next band, and we were thinking about different mechanics, different play patterns that were resonating, I was really just, and this is my personal experience, very, very interested in and taken by that concept of collectability. So it's the one behavior that's been constant for generations and generations. So yes, it's Skylanders now, and my daughter, several years ago, it was those Silly Band bracelets, if you remember those. When I was growing up, it was all about baseball cards, and I still have them in my closet and won't part with them, and I'm not sure why, but I just won't. And there was the Beanie Baby craze, which was billions and billions of dollars. So I was very, very interested in this idea of collectability. So how does all of this then translate into wearable tech? And what I can do is talk a little bit about it from our perspective, but I'll also share some ideas for any wearable tech entrepreneurs out there with some ideas that maybe you can think about with your business models to differentiate. So first, I just want to summarize, and I'm going to do a broad brushstroke of how most people see wearables right now. So with wearable tech, over the last 3 CESs, I'd say, when you go there, the main complaint is they're all the same. They all do activity tracking, and maybe one differentiates itself a little bit by style or a little bit by the data, but by and large, they all basically do the same thing. They also have very, very low retention rates so far. So the average use of a wearable is about 3 to 6 months before they find their way into the sock drawer. It's hardware companies. They have traditionally low margins. and very, very little recurring revenue. And they all tend to focus on the same demographic. So starting with millennials at the low end of the range, really focusing on the Gen X, where you have a little bit more disposable income, a little bit in baby boomers. And then at the other side of the barbell, we're starting to see some companies get into the younger end of that demo. So child tracking, GPS, emojis to send to friends, something very simple for kind of elementary school. So personally, when we were thinking about the next band, we saw a big, big opportunity with what we call Generation Z. So that's anywhere, we say, between the ages of 12 and maybe through college age. And I find it interesting that this demographic seems to be very ignored, even though it's the most connected demographic in the market right now, and they have the largest influence on spending disposable income as well. So we decided that was our market. That's what we want to focus on. So now I'll talk a little bit about our product and the next band and why we set it up the way we did. So we created the next band. You can see I'm wearing one now. And the concept behind the next band is that it's if everyone can see it, it's a modular, hackable smart band. So we have these removable, collectible mods that can have all sorts of different styles. They can be licensed images. They can be characters. They can be fashion statements. You can put any kind of content on there. But no matter what kind of content or style you have on one of your mods, the whole purpose is that they're all hackable and they're all programmable. And you don't need to be a developer. It takes about 3 seconds to program one of your mods. So for example, I could simply double tap this middle mod and turn my band into a Spotify controller. But I could have just as easily have double tapped that same mod and open my garage door, or send an email to my best friend, or have it light up in a pattern every time my favorite team scores a goal. So giving a lot of flexibility to the user. And we've partnered with companies such as If This Then That, so we can take advantage of the thousands of recipes that their community has already built. And we have an API of our own that we're opening up in the next month or so that third parties can give more content to our next band when we launch. And going back to the Skylanders idea, one of the things we're seeing a lot of interest is the concept of gaming. So where this is like a Skylanders on your wrist. So this could be a weapon or a character or a power-up that unlocks some special powers in your mobile game. So we're looking at bridging that physical and digital divide as well. So we're focusing on that razor blade business model. So we looked at our projected lifetime value of a customer and made the determination that we need an install base. And that's how we are looking to build our business model and build that high margin recurring revenue. And we're about to launch, so we'll see how that goes. But we all want to avoid this, right? The race to the bottom. So what I wanted to leave everyone with is just some ideas. You know, I talked a little bit earlier about how quickly this industry is starting to mature. So it feels like we're in the 3rd inning of wearables, but already it feels like there's commoditization. And when you have commoditization of any kind of industry, then price is the biggest differentiator. And this is what we're starting to see. We're starting to see Fitbit drop and Misfit drop and Jawbone drop their prices because there isn't a lot of differentiation. So I just want to challenge everyone out there who's thinking about new business model. Do you have any data that is very valuable to your customers or to third parties? Do you have any high margin accessories that you can sell along with your wearable? Do you have any services? Do you know the lifetime value of your customer, and can you give away your wearable device? Does that make sense? And then you can underwrite the receivables to generate some working capital. So lots of different things to think about. If you have any questions, please feel free to come up to me afterwards. I don't know if we have time now. I'd be a bad CEO if I didn't mention that we're also giving a coupon code for our next band today for the next 2 days. So it's AWE 2016. It's going to retail for $149. We're doing a promo of $99, but with this it goes down to $89 for the next 2 days. And with that, I'll just open it up if we have time for questions. No questions.
But I'm sure Adam will be around if you have questions for him afterwards.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of mobile phones go up when the discount or the promotion was up, so I think you'll be getting a lot of orders.
We have a booth too, so feel free to come by there too.
Great. Everyone help me thank Adam.
Thank you.